Why do some market gardeners make $80,000 on half an acre while others struggle to make $20,000 on the same amount of land? After spending a decade talking to over 200 market gardeners, I found something striking. The successful ones all track the same seven numbers religiously, and the rest, the struggling ones, they might track one or two, but it's usually none. Now, I'm not a farmer, but I am a farm business owner who spent over 10 years studying what makes market farms profitable. And that gives me something that a lot of farmers don't have: the ability to see patterns across a wide variety of operations without being emotionally attached to any single method. Today, I'm going to break down those seven metrics that separate profitable market gardens from hobby operations. And more importantly, I'll show you exactly how to calculate them, what the numbers should tell you, and how to use them to make better business decisions. So let's get into it. The first number is revenue per square foot. And this could be the single most important metric for market gardeners because land is usually your limiting factor. Here's the formula: take your total annual revenue and divide it by your total growing space in square foot. Simple. Now, why does that number matter? See, most new farmers grow what they like to grow. They grow what they think looks pretty. They grow what looks fun. They grow what looks interesting in a seed catalog. But the profitable growers focus on what generates the most revenue per square foot. And that is the big difference. One, this metric forces you to think about opportunity cost. Every square foot of growing lettuce at $3 per square foot could be growing tomatoes at $15 per square foot. So you have to think about that trade off. Two, it reveals which crops are actually profitable versus which ones just feel productive, but you're not actually making money. You're just spending time on them. In three, track this by crop, not just overall, and you'll be shocked what you discover. More than likely, certain crops are making a very high dollar per square foot. Other crops are making a very low dollar per square foot. And as you advance your operation, you'll want to focus on the crops making more and weed out the crops making less. The second number is cost per unit produced, and almost nobody calculates it correctly. You need to know exactly how much it costs to produce one bunch of carrots, one bag of salad mix, or one pint of cherry tomatoes. The problem is, farmers think only about seed costs. That's usually what they focus on. They forget about labor. They forget about additives to the soil like compost and fertilizer. They forget about irrigation, harvest bins, rubber bands, wash water, all the extra stuff you have to pay for to get that product from the field to the customer. And this is usually where farms bleed money. You think you're making $4 in profit on a $5 bunch of kale because the seeds cost 50 cents, and the seed for one plant is basically zero. Wow, this is all free profits. I plant it and it will grow. I'm literally growing money. But when you actually calculate the labor to plant, weed, which is a big time consumer, harvest and wash, another big time consumer, and bunch it, plus all the bed prep, you might be making 75 cents, or you might be losing money. You don't know until you run these numbers. One, track labor separately. Labor is almost always your biggest cost, that most farmers dramatically underestimate how many hours go into each crop. Two, include your own labor at a real hourly rate. If you don't pay yourself, you're running a hobby, not a business. You have to get paid for this to be a business. Three, calculate this annually. Then you can use it to set prices for the next season. You can't price intelligently without knowing your actual costs. Otherwise, you're just guessing. It doesn't matter what the other vendors are charging because you don't know their cost structure. You need to price for your customers based on your cost structure. The third metric is the harvest ratio. This is the percentage of what you plant that actually makes it to sale. If you plant 1,000 lettuce heads and you sell 850, then your harvest ratio is 85%. Now, here's what this number is critical for when it comes to planning and profitability. Most farmers might think, I need 100 bunches of carrots for Saturday's market. So I'll plant 100 carrots, 100 units of carrots. But if your harvest ratio is 70%, you shortchanged your market stand by 30 bunches. Most of the profitable farms, they track harvest ratio by crop and by season because here's the thing, it's not always going to be flat. Your spring lettuce might have a 90% harvest ratio, but your summer lettuce might drop to 60% because of heat and bolting. If you don't know this information, then you can't plan production accurately. This is why it's critical to know what percentage of what you plant actually gets sold. 1. Low harvest ratios tell you where you're losing money, whether it's to pest pressure, disease pressure, poor variety selection, harvest timing issues, whatever it is. This metric is going to help guide you towards where you need to fix things. 2. You can use it to calculate your planting quantities. If you need 100 units at a harvest ratio of 75%, then you're going to need to plant 133 units to account for the ones that don't actually make it to sale. 3. This number directly impacts your revenue per square foot. A crop with a high, like 95% harvest ratio, is more profitable than the same crop with a 70% harvest ratio, even if the sales price is identical. Why is that? Well, with 95% being sold or making it to sale, all the labor that went into raising that 95%, you get paid back for it. If only 70% makes it to sale, 30% you put some labor into, but you never had a chance to get paid for it. Metric number 4 is labor hours per $1,000 in revenue. This is where the romantic idea of farming crashes into economic reality with a magnificent explosion. Because if this doesn't match up, you have a hobby that's pretending to be a business. You take your total labor hours, including your own, so your staff hours and your hours, you divide it by the revenue in thousands. So if you worked 2,000 hours and made $50,000, that's 40 hours per $1,000 in revenue. Now, I'm guessing top performing farms are going to be something like this. The profitable ones are going to be under 30 hours per $1,000. The struggling ones, they're often 60, 80, 100 hours per 1,000. Think about what this means. At 30 hours per $1,000 in revenue, you're earning about $33 per hour. At 80 hours per $1,000, you're making $12.50 per hour, and that's before expenses. How many hours does it take to generate $1,000 in revenue? Intuitively, you just realize the more hours it takes me, the less profitable that I am. That's what this metric really reveals. And the farmers with low labor hours, they're not working less, they're working smarter. They've gotten better at their jobs. They've eliminated bottlenecks. They've invested in the right tools. And crucially, they've dropped labor intensive crops that don't pay enough. They have systems. They're still working. They're still working hard, but they're working smarter. One, track this number by crop. Some crops might look profitable until you calculate the labor. Things like peas or green beans or strawberries with heavy harvests requirements, they can often be labor killers. They might sound really great and they might sell well at the market. You might be able to price them really nicely. But when you're having to pick all these things by hand, they can kill you in terms of labor costs, whether it's yours or paid. Two, this metric reveals where mechanizations or system improvements would have the biggest ROI. If you want to improve your farm, this number is going to guide you where to do that. If washing greens, for example, takes 10 hours per week, maybe that upgraded salad spinner or bubbler for $3,000 makes sense. Three, use this number to evaluate whether hiring is worth it. If you're at 70 hours per 1,000 and you hire someone at $20 per hour to do specific tasks, you might improve profitability by reducing your own labor bottleneck. Similarly, if you're running a low hours to 1,000 ratio, it might show that you're really well organized, have great systems, so bringing an employee in can actually help enhance things without changing that metric very much. Metric number 5, customer acquisition cost or CAC, CAC. This is how much you spend to acquire one new customer. Add up all of your costs that you spend on marketing: flyers, social media ads, market fees, free samples, plus the time you spend on marketing activities. Then just divide it by the new customers you acquired for all that money and all that effort. Most businesses, most farmers are going to have no idea what this number is. Here's why this number matters more than you think. If a business spends $2,000 on a beautiful market tent setup to attract customers when they could have spent $200 on targeted social media ads and gotten better results, but they didn't know their numbers, they lost out. They couldn't make informed decisions. The real insight comes when you compare the CAC to customer lifetime value. I know we're getting into the business terminology, but this stuff exists for a reason. It's important. CAC is the cost to acquire a customer. Customer lifetime value is how much that customer is worth to your business over the lifetime that they are a customer. Week after week after week, you add that number up, that's your customer lifetime value. If it costs you $50 to acquire a CSA customer, but that customer spends $1,200 with you over 2 years, that's a great investment. And big businesses know this. Starbucks has a lifetime value for customers of something like $13,000, $14,000. So they can spend a lot of money to get you through the door the first time, get you hooked on the coffee, because they know you're going to come back and bring tens of thousands of dollars to their bottom line. One, different channels might have wildly different CAC. Farmers markets might have high upfront costs, but low customer acquisition costs once you're established. CSAs require more marketing, but deliver more reliable customers. Two, track which marketing efforts actually bring in customers. The Instagram post with 500 likes, did it generate any sales? If not, it's ego food, not business strategy. I've seen this a lot with my business. You might think Instagram is this great channel to promote your business, but we've looked at the numbers. We don't generate very many sales at all from Instagram. So while the numbers might look great, while people might engage with the posts, they don't convert to sales for us. So we don't spend a lot of time on Instagram as a result of that. Three, A lower CAC doesn't always mean better. A $10 restaurant customer might cost nothing to acquire, but just shops once. A $50 CSA customer might stay for 3 years. You have to also know the lifetime value, not just the acquisition costs. But in general, low acquisition costs are worth exploring and testing to see if you can turn them into longtime customers with that high lifetime value. Metric number 6, the cash flow gap. This is the number of weeks between when you spend money and when you get paid. For most market farms, you're buying seeds, supplies in February and March, but you're not seeing revenue until those crops go to sale in May and June. That's a 12 to 16 week cash flow gap. And this is why profitable farms can still get themselves into financial trouble and can still get or go out of business. For example, you might have $50,000 in projected revenue for 1 year, but if you run out of cash in April, it doesn't matter. You're done. You're scrambling for loans. You're trying to borrow money. What are you going to do to fill the gap? We have to look at cash flow on a month by month, week by week basis. And this is why CSAs are so valuable to many farms. You get cash up front in February or March before your expenses peak. That gives you operating income to work with right away when you're spending a bunch of money. Compare that to farmers markets where you spend all spring growing crops, putting in labor, only to then start selling weeks and weeks labor, hoping to make that money back when late spring and summer arrive. The profitable farmers, they just don't track annual profit. They track weekly cash flow. They know exactly when money goes out and when it comes in, and they structure their business model to minimize that gap and de-risk their model as much as possible. 1. Map your cash flow monthly before your season starts. You need to know your maximum cash requirements, the most money you have tied up before revenue starts coming in. 2. CSAs, farm store memberships, and pre orders, they're not just sales strategies, they're cash flow management tools. Use them strategically. 3. If you can't cover the gap with savings, you need a line of credit, an operating loan, a credit card. So don't pretend you can bootstrap through this all with zero cash reserves. That's how profitable businesses can still fail. You need a buffer in there to cover these gaps. The final metric that you need to be paying attention to and tracking: gross profit margin by channel, because not all revenue is created equal. Your gross profit margin is your revenue minus your direct costs. That's seeds, supplies, labor for that sale divided by revenue. But the key is you need to calculate this number separately for each channel. Farmers market, CSA, wholesale, restaurant accounts, they're all going to have different margins. I've seen farmers who will talk about wholesale is killing their business, saying, I only get 40% of my retail when I sell wholesale. But when you factor in that wholesale requires no marketing labor, no Saturday mornings, no booth setup, no unsold product risk, the actual margin might actually be better than direct to consumer retail. Farmers markets can look great on revenue numbers, $1,200 on a Saturday morning. But if you subtract the market fee, the gas, the hours of selling, the hours of setup, oftentimes that's 6 to 8 hour days, and the spoiled product or the unsold product you're bringing home, your gross margin might only be 45%. Compare that to a restaurant account that pays you wholesale prices but orders $400 every Tuesday morning, requiring no selling time, and buys everything that you bring. That's 60% gross margin, and it's better than that 45% that you thought was so amazing selling retail at the farmer's market. The other key here is it's really important to have multiple market streams when you're ready. I wouldn't start out with multiple market streams because that can be very tough to manage. But once you have consistent production, you know what you're doing, having multiple market streams that have different profit margins can help balance out these swings and help ensure that you're selling everything that you grow, which is also the name of a book that I wrote. Link to that below. 1. Track every channel's margins separately. Include all costs: time, gas, spoilage, booth fees, all of that. Most farmers dramatically overestimate their farmers market profitability because they don't count labor. And as I've said, that's a long day when you account for driving both ways, setup and teardown, and the selling hours. You can be 6 to 8 hour days, just depending on how long your market is and how close you are to it. There's a lot of cost in that, and you need to be accounting for that. 2, diversification sounds smart, but every channel does have overhead. 3 farmers markets, 2 restaurants, a CSA. You might be spreading yourself too thin. Focus on the channels with the best margins for your situation. Be careful adding complexity. Add one channel at a time, get it rolling, master it, ensure you can produce for that channel as well as your existing customers. Make sure everybody's happy before adding more. Usually, where you get into trouble is doing too much too fast. 3, the goal isn't to maximize revenue, it's to maximize profit per hour worked. A farmer making $80,000 with 80% of it from one efficient channel is doing better than a farmer making $90,000 while burning out across 5 channels. These are the 7 metrics that separate profitable market farms from hobby farms: revenue per square foot, cost per unit produced, harvest ratio, labor hours per $1,000 in revenue, customer acquisition cost, cash flow gap, and gross profit margin by channel. Now, here's the thing: none of these metrics are complicated. You don't need a business degree. You don't need fancy software. Any of it can be done in Google Sheets. You just need the discipline to sit down and track the data so you can put it into the sheet and then put in the time to actually analyze it. The numbers mean nothing if you don't pay attention to them, if you don't look at them and try and find trends. If you're not going to go all in on this, I'll be honest, just don't do it, wing it, and see where that gets you. But if you really want to start a profitable business, you have to get in the habit very early on of knowing these numbers and using them to guide your decision-making process. Trust me, I've spent a decade talking to farmers, and the pattern is always the same. The successful ones know their numbers, and the struggling ones don't. It's really simple. Growing skills matter, but growing skill is only about 30% of the equation. The other 70%, that's business decisions. And you cannot make good business decisions without good business data. If you want to dive deeper into business strategies, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of successful market gardeners every week on my podcast, which I've linked to below. Real farmers, real numbers, real strategies. Check it out. Farm small, farm smart, and Carrot Cash Flow. And if you found this video valuable, hit the bell, hit subscribe, leave a comment below. I'll put out more videos every week to help you and your farm become more profitable. Thanks for watching, and until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.